Good afternoon. Welcome everyone to another Ageless webinar. Today we are laser focused on gene therapy and a wide variety of interrelated topics on what it's going to take to get gene therapy into humans and to benefit our bodies and our brains and the people we care about most to effectively target aging. Something that we and the people on this call are very passionate about, reversing and slowing down the aging process. Today, I am with Liz Parrish, Johnny Adams, Paul Tozer, and Kyle Brewer. Liz is going to be taking us through a few different items within the gene therapy space that she's been working on. For those who don't know, Liz is the CEO of Bioviva, and their focus is bringing gene therapy to the masses. So thanks a lot for coming on today, Liz. Really appreciate it, and everyone. Yeah, thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm really happy to be here, and I'm just finding my screen again. There you are. Yay. So yeah, today we're going to talk about gene therapy and get everyone up to speed on what's happening with gene therapy currently and what we're doing at Bioviva and what some of our goals are, which is exciting. And so let's go. So when we look at gene therapy, a lot of people think that we're looking at a brand new technology, but gene therapy has been around for many decades, and it was hypothesized in the 1960s to be maybe an adequate tool in order to genetically modify the predisposition for disease. And in the 70s, it really started to gain steam, but it didn't see its first paper, very strong paper, until the 1980s. And at that point, it was just kind of onward and upward for a little while until the 1990s, when it saw some of its biggest failures. And actually, one of the first diseases that was treated with gene therapy was severe combined immune deficiency. And the first girl who was treated, now 30 years later, is still a spokesperson for gene therapy and how it revolutionized her life. So there were a lot of good things happening in the 1990s. But with the use of new vectors in the 1990s, we saw what's called integrational mutagenesis. Some viruses that are used to deliver gene therapy. Now, when we do gene therapy, they use viruses. They attenuate them so that they can't get you sick, and they use them just to deliver a gene. But some of the older gene delivery methods actually integrated randomly in the genome, and some of these did this to a consequence that created leukemia in a few children. This slowed down the area of development in gene therapy a bit, but then upon the death of another child due to the vector of another gene therapy, a different gene therapy delivery method, we saw a screeching halt. And unfortunately, that stopped the industry almost to a standstill for another decade while it became only a research project. But fortunately, out of that, what came is delivery methods that were safer than ever before. And that's what is used in gene therapy today. There are several approved gene therapies, including 3 that were approved this year for the curative effect over hemophilia A, hemophilia B, and Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. And those are just 3 of the last, I think, 12 now that have been approved. And that's really exciting news, because we're going to work from a sick care system to a healthcare system. This is the type of technology that can actually find weaknesses in the human genome, fix them so that people live a healthy, normal life. Now, what we do at Bioviva is we're actually trying to take this technology to treat the biggest medical unmet need, which is biological aging. And I think that that's why everyone is here on this call. So hi, Johnny, hi, Kyle, and hi, Paul. You're all with me because we're all really enthusiasts in this area. Kyle, obviously, though, likes to make molecules that mimic like gene products, right? Which is really cool too. and great use for some of the technology. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen of my presentation here. And unfortunately, the whole thing backed out. So I'm going to have to go to slideshow and presenters mode and hope it works out. But again, my company is Bioviva. I have another company. This company, Bioviva, is focused on longevity for the whole of the human body. So our goal would be to put the human body into homeostasis, meaning that it would repair faster than it degrades, because we see biological aging as a disease, and the process of biological aging is cellular degeneration over time. We focus on the hallmarks of aging, an ever-growing laundry list of things to target and reverse so that we can live longer and healthier. I have another company called Genoricis. It is focusing your eyes on gene therapies for the eyes. And then I work in the regulatory space, and we might talk about that. So the problem is aging cells, and right now we've spent a few years talking about infectious disease. And infectious disease is a terrible thing. It will come and go as viruses find their way into making us sick and becoming a contagion to the people around us. But actually, most people in the world today die of non-communicable diseases, which are not infectious disease. We don't communicate them to each other. They're more either programmed into our cells or part of cellular aging. And the top killers in non-communicable diseases globally are all now aging-associated diseases. And that leads to the death of 41 million people a year. So that's a staggering number of people that are dying of these diseases that are potentially preventable. Approximately 15 million of the 41 million will die prematurely of aging-associated diseases. So that's vastly due to lifestyle problems and environmental issues. So this is an old graph that I've shown many times, but for people who are new to your channel, it might be of interest. But we have passed the bridge of having more people over the age of 65 on the planet than under the age of 5. Medicine has desired and decided and determined that it is important to keep people alive as long as possible. But maybe not healthy as long as possible. And this leads to what's called the silver tsunami, which is a crashing economy because people cannot work any longer, and there are not enough payers coming up to actually pay for the illnesses of these people. So let's talk about health span and lifespan. So health span is the years that you live in good health. And in many countries now, people are living to the age of 65 in relatively good health. And that's why we set these rates of retirement where we do. Actually, when the retirement rate was originally set, only about 50% of the US population would make it to that age. So that's why living to retirement was really special, because it meant that you would live to do something after your manual labor. But today, it vastly is set with a multitude of diseases and side effects from what I consider, in some cases, bad drugs. And then you spend many years, unfortunately, in ill health. And the idea of regenerative medicine is to create health span that is as long as your your lifespan, and then exceed it. Make both of those areas grow, but you not live in bad health for a number of years. And the reason why it's a great idea to do that, not only because we want to live better and longer, but we have the law of diminishing returns on our lifespan. So by the time we have gone to school and we have gone out there and worked, and we have the ability to take a vacation in a nice and friendly zone of the world, or maybe we want an adventure, we have diminishing returns on our health. So we can't go as far and do as many things as we'd like to. And so, you know, everyone in the regenerative medicine space knows the value of health span, and we want to more than square that curve. I know people don't like the square the curve, so that's why regenerative medicine may even get us farther. But let's focus on the health. Now, when we are looking at aging, the reason that I believe that biological aging is a disease, not chronological aging, we want you to get really old by years, but biological aging is the reason why we get all of the diseases on this slide here. And more than this, of course, but type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, COPD, chronic kidney disease, dementia, cancer, those are all problems of biological aging, and COVID is on here. So infectious disease plays in here as well, because as we grow older and we get things like immune senescence, meaning that our cells in our immune system can no longer divide enough to protect us against infectious disease, we start to die more rapidly of infectious disease. There was a great paper that showed actually that people with short telomeres were the ones most likely to die of COVID. The complication of treating biological aging is that hallmarks of aging is a puzzle we're trying to put together. So you can certainly treat something without being able to measure it. I mean, historically, that's what we have done. Almost all of medicine based around is just basically seeing if symptoms will go away if we throw a drug at them. But science is at a completely new level where we actually have biomarkers of aging. And this is an exciting puzzle, and especially exciting for all of those of us working in genetics, trying to find genes that will solve the problems of each one of these biomarkers. And then still knowing that we're dealing with unknown pieces of the puzzle. So, of course, we think the solution is gene therapy, and this slide here is a little bit out of date. As I told you, there have been some approvals that are not on this list. Hemophilia A is now passed, and of course, hemophilia B is on there, but not Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. But what's really exciting about this list is that this is real science, it's evidence-based, it's been through clinical trials, and repurposing the use of this modality to treat aging is right in line with where science needs to be right now. As we see changes in the coming soon, like sickle cell anemia, that will be the first gene therapy that's led by CRISPR in a curative gene therapy. And then the bullosa is a skin disorder in children, and it's the first topical gene therapy, which I know a lot of people are excited about, especially in the aging space. This is the power of gene therapy. So on the left, this boy has muscular dystrophy, and he's having a hard time climbing stairs. On the right, this is the same boy 3 months after follistatin gene therapy. This is a gene that we're looking at to treat sarcopenia or muscle loss in an aging population. And then really quick, let's
just a quick question.
Yes.
Was that done by Bioviva, or was that done by
No, I think that was done by, I think that was a Pfizer study, but we do use that gene. Yeah, I wish we could put our hat on that, but that was Nationwide Children's Hospital, I believe, that started that study.
Cool.
So here you're seeing a video of how gene therapy works. So a gene is put into a vector that used to be a virus, but is no longer a virus. And then the reason that we would use these viral vectors is because this is what they do. They transfect cells, and they actually get genetic material into the nucleus of the cell. So there's a lot of different types of delivery methods, but we like these vectors because for long-term expression, something that you want to see for a multitude of years, we want to get into the nucleus of the cell. Then the gene goes in, and just like the rest of your chromosomes, the genes are read, and then proteins are made by those genes, and they're vastly given by IV, or they may be given by image-guided directed delivery if you have a specific organ of interest. So there's your therapy. The product of this therapy is actually the product that your cells make. So your cells become the drug factories rather than your liver and the rest of your body having to digest medicines. They are given sometimes it's considered once in a lifetime treatment, but many of the gene therapies may be needed to be given every 5 to 10 years. We have yet to see. Here are some of the longevity associated genes, and this might be a good place to pause and get everyone's input. What do you guys think of these longevity genes? I bet you have a bunch of other suggestions. This was just a short list.
I'll jump in just for just talking through this gene therapy, partially for our viewers. So the way I understand is, you have this information in this mRNA, whatever the delivery mechanism is, you get it into the cell, that information is then read, and in turn, transcription, taking that information and producing new proteins in a better or more quantity of those proteins of that information that you sent into the cell, basically increases the concentration of those specific proteins that are longevity, have some longevity benefit. Is that the way you guys see just from a conceptual standpoint?
Yeah, that's a great way to say it. Actually, yeah, we use DNA, and then DNA becomes RNA, and that transcribes for the protein. And there's different ways to do that as well. And yeah, please, everyone, talk about it.
No, sure, yeah, that makes sense. So, in terms of like the speed that occurs, or like, when the cell is looking at, say that you have your nuclear DNA, and then you have these floating other DNA or mRNA, depending on your delivery system. I mean, how much of the protein production mechanism is allocated, within that cell towards these external, inputs that are put in from the gene therapy versus the nuclear DNA? Is there a certain percentage, or is this a well-known thing, or is it like 90% still coming from the nuclear DNA, but the cell says, okay, I'll allocate 10% of my resources to produce these new proteins, or is it more like a 50-50, or any thoughts on that?
That's a really good question. Actually, Kyle might know a better answer. How I know to answer that question is, so this does become nuclear DNA. It's not in your chromosome. It's sitting outside of it, and it will read when your cells are reading the coding DNA. But what we do is we put a promoter on the gene therapy. And so that promoter tells the cell how many copies of the protein to make and how often. So we can take a gene that you might naturally have in your body, like follistatin, and your body would only transcribe some small amount of it, but and this is why you have diminishing returns on muscle mass, and you start to become weaker and weaker with age. But we put in a copy of the same gene, and we tell it to transcribe a lot. And then your body has a lot more of the free protein running around, doing its job, therefore having a therapeutic effect.
Interesting. And are those proteins primarily in the cell, or can some of these proteins be, see these extracellular problems you were talking about in your other slide? Like, can some of the proteins be outside of the cells too, or would this be only inside?
Oh, yeah. So there are genes that actually share proteins in the blood. So something like follistatin, its mechanism of action on muscle mass probably is because it's a shared protein, and it blocks something called myostatin. But other genes are not. So telomerase reverse transcriptase, a gene that lengthens the caps at the ends of the chromosomes, is not shared outside of the cell, or at least not shared well. So we have to get it in as many cells in the body as possible, which is a limiting factor for gene therapy right now. It's one of the big problems that we have. But most genes on the list that I showed you, actually outside of the one gene, telomerase reverse transcriptase, the rest will share their protein freely with the entire organism, which makes gene therapy a much bigger success for patients.
Paul, you got a comment there?
Yeah, I wanted to ask Liz a rhetorical question. I think I know the answer to this question, but I think some of our listeners may be wondering about this. What are the advantages of gene therapy as opposed to just regularly injecting the target protein?
Yeah, well, that is a great question, Paul. And we get asked that a lot. So for instance, follistatin, there you can get the peptide for follistatin, but its half-life is minuscule, I mean minutes. And so it would be so cost prohibitive to try to inject that into your body. And then of course you have the multitude of risk of driving
Right.
an
You'd have to
immune
do it
response.
several times a day. Yeah.
Yeah, and whenever you're breaking the skin, that's actually not good as well. I've met so many people who were protein injectors and then they became very interested in, or peptide injectors, both. They became very interested in the gene therapies because they were having immunologic responses just to the needle prick with the protein in it. So you definitely don't want to drive an immune response to healthy therapeutics. But I mean, that sounds like I'm super promoting gene therapy. Gene therapy is really cost prohibitive for most people, but I believe that by treating the biggest medical unmet needs, we can make it affordable.
Right.
And that's what my company is interested in.
And also, if you look at the long-term costs of buying an expensive peptide and injecting it over years compared to getting a single gene therapy that's going to continuously produce that protein, it might even out depending on the relative costs.
Yeah, and there's other groups that are doing like shorter acting gene therapies, but actually they become cost prohibitive because if you're looking at 6 to 12 months expression, once you start adding up the years, you're better off doing a long-lasting gene therapy that may stick with your body for a lifetime. And that's a really powerful tool.
Yeah.
Go for it, Johnny.
Answers to three things that Liz mentioned. The first, there are individuals who have wet macular degeneration and other eye problems like bleeding within the eye that go in, and every, say, 4 to 6, 8 weeks or so, they get a shot in the eye. And it's not really a big deal necessarily, but that person would rather not. So imagine just getting one shot of a gene therapy in the eye, which essentially, I think the one for wet macular degeneration and vessel occlusion, vessel bleeding is VEGF inhibitors. So, and there are gene therapies in development now that do that. And I understand earlier Liz mentioned that part of what they're working on in her wheelhouse is ophthalmic solutions. So
yeah, absolutely. Gosh, they're so powerful in that space because the eye is immune privileged. And so it gives such a great zone for gene therapies to work, and a zone in which you don't need as much gene as you need to treat the entire body, making affordability.
Yeah, one and done, at least for a number of years. Better than a shot in the eye every month.
Yeah, I think Johnny, like, you just really pulled on why I love gene therapy so much. Like, people send me, bottles of pills and they say, oh, try these. And I'm just not consistent. And so, gene therapy sort of takes out that, the patient problem for medical doctors of, did you take your drug as prescribed and every day or every week, or can you come in every 2 weeks for a shot? It's just, those are not things that I want to spend my time doing.
Right.
They're seconds out of my life.
When you were showing that screen with various genes with potential for therapy, I believe you asked if we knew of any others. And if I heard that question right, I have a few. And if
Good. And you
right.
can discuss them if you like, because this is not a complete list. This is a very short list of candidates that we look into specifically. But Johnny, tell us about some of the ones that you're looking at as well.
Well, I can do better. I'll show you. May I
Awesome.
share my
Okay.
screen?
I'm gonna back out of this then and let you do it.
Okay.
This
There we
is what
go.
this is all about. This is gonna be a fun one.
Thank you.
Collaborative effect. Oh, here, notice I already, for my notes for today, I already snagged your image. So thank you very much. I'll add this
You're
to my
welcome.
collection, but this is a list of various age management or aging related genes that it's one of several that I collect over the years. George Church created this. It is, well, no, this is the hard copy I have, but this is available online. Anyone who wants this and some others I'm going to show you, I'll be glad to send it to you. But
And there's CCR5, the resistance to HIV, which that doctor in China who edited those embryos got in trouble for using.
well,
That's
wait. Oh,
the big drama bomb in the room.
yeah, but wasn't that also, oh, by the way, has something to do with improving cognitive
Intelligence.
effectiveness and
Yeah.
intelligence?
Probably
Just
why they
happened
used
to-
it.
It's very interesting. I got a quick question. This is very interesting. I mean, kind of looping in artificial intelligence into the conversation a little bit. The way I understand, there's a system that was built called AlphaFold that essentially created a way to simulate every single protein possible. And what I'm wondering is like, how precise are our gene therapy tools in the sense like, I mean, the way I understand, one gene can make actually multiple proteins through some kind of alternative splicing mechanism. But can we actually isolate and say, out of those 20,000 proteins that are possible, say we pick one, we pick protein X, and we're like, out of this 20,000, we like this one. We determine we want this more production of this. Can we then define or sort of like strategically build a gene therapy that would specifically upregulate that protein? Is that the process?
We can do a pretty good job with it because what we do is we do gene variants. And so there's the gene, the whole gene, and then there are gene variances. And when we connect a promoter with a gene product that we're looking to upregulate a protein, we're doing it on a variant that is the protein that we're looking to express.
Okay, interesting. Kyle, any thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, I have quite a few comments. So just on that point, yeah, you can make any protein you want pretty easily. The big problem is delivery and control. So as Liz mentioned, normally you deliver it with a strong promoter that just to make sure that the gene is made. So getting it to the right place, like if you want to get it to a neuron and you're injecting it intravenously, that's very difficult. Or a heart cell. So that's one of the main things. That's called tropism. So like for AAVs, these viruses that are re-engineered to deliver genes, there's a lot of people working on targeting the right cell type. And then there's also a way where you can control where it's expressed. So let's say it goes everywhere and you only want it to be made in neurons. Then you can put in like a synapsin promoter that's only expressed in neurons. So the gene will only be made in neurons. And there used to be a problem with something called silencing, where the promoter would basically get attacked by a methylation protein, and the genes would turn off over time. So that probably happens to some extent with other promoters as well, but the newer ones are a little bit better because that's kind of a well-known thing now. And also another advantage of gene therapy over traditional small molecules is whenever you take a small molecule, you get a really big spike of the small molecule. So you never really get the right amount except for like a few minutes in time. You basically get the spike, it falls off, you have to take it again. Gene therapy, it goes up, it basically stays at a flat line, and over the years, it will decrease a little bit, but you get this constant steady flow of the gene. So it's really controlled delivery. And if the spiking mechanism from small molecules and injected peptides and proteins, that can be a problem because you can lead to side effects if you have too much of something. Also, if you have too little of something, but normally if you have too much of something, this can lead to problems. So there's all sorts of complicated things that can go on here. But I think right now we're really good at getting genes into cells, but the big problem is delivery and control of those genes. And I think those are, so people are really working on delivery right now. And then I think the next thing is going to be control.
So I like the examples you gave, and it's an interesting concept. I mean, so if I was trying to target and had a good delivery system, say for the heart, and some of those gene therapy vectors, right, leaked into the skin or these other areas of the body, with your control mechanism, you could then say, okay, only turn on the upregulation of that protein in the heart cells. The rest of them don't turn on. That's your idea, or the idea?
Well, yeah, it's definitely possible. I mean, people already do this quite regularly. We don't know the right promoter for all different cell types, but and there's many that will work in multiple cell types as well. But yeah, people are figuring this out more and more and figuring out good ones. So like people say, oh, this is the right promoter to use, and they try it and it kind of works. Maybe the expression is a little bit too low, or it has overlap slightly, like maybe it's expressed 90% in heart cells, but also maybe it's like 10% in skin cells. And so the question is that good enough or not? So it's always a nuanced thing that goes on with biology, but we're getting better and better all the time.
I'm wondering
We're
in
lucky.
the, I was just gonna say real quick, in the human body, I mean, I could understand if you were like had a in vitro, but in the heart, how would you even know if it's working? I mean, without a biopsy, would you look at something in the blood to then determine that that control mechanism is working? I mean, is there or imaging, or how would you even know if it?
I think that's a good question. And I think that that's why we're lucky to be in the regenerative space right now, because we're working with genes that could, benefit tissues. Okay. So for the genes that I showed you, they're not going to have, so they're shared proteins. So even if you treat their, you can treat your muscles here and have a beneficial effect to your heart. With a long-lasting gene therapy. As we get into phenotypical type gene therapies, which we're not in that space yet, it would become more pertinent that you only got those genes into certain places. So right now where we're starting is in genes that if they transfect different cells of the body, those cells then just become more factories for protein distribution that we want to have all over the body. Now, it becomes different when you get into the regulatory system, because they would like to have you, if you're treating the heart, specifically treat the heart tissue. And so that's where image-guided delivery comes. But, you still will get some loosed therapies. And in all the diseases that I showed you, those are also diseases that benefit from the gene. Maybe it's specifically targeted to one area, the bone marrow or, the muscle, but outside of what's called ex vivo gene therapy, where cells are treated outside the body and then re-put into the body, replanted. All of the gene therapies have a variety of leakage into other tissues. But again, since you're working on regenerative genes, that shouldn't be a problem. So Kyle, what do you think of that?
Yeah, how I always view it is it's always good to think about the outcome first. So it doesn't really matter so much if we can tell if it goes to the heart. It matters if we're getting good outcomes for patients. And I think that's the big thing. And so kind of how this works is normally it's tested first in cells and then shortly after in mice. And we can very clearly see if it goes to heart tissue in mice. And then there's often studies in large animals as well, and then there are studies in humans as well. And then sometimes you could take biopsies. So like if it's a topical, such as for this EB disease, you can obviously take skin biopsy quite easily. And then if it's something internal like a liver, you can take a liver biopsy. And then the heart or the brain is much more difficult to take a biopsy from, because any damage to those tissues can be a serious problem. So that's more difficult. And then normally how we end up finding these, if it's going to the right place in the end, is normally with autopsies. So someone who got a gene therapy who may be in their 80s and then they die a few years later, then you can see whether it actually did go to the right place. And but how I always think about it is outcome based. So are we getting good results for patients and what's going on there, and also do the preliminary work in animals and cells to see whether it's working in those systems.
I think that that would be a great thing to have patients do, is to hopefully patients of longevity don't ever need to be autopsied. But certainly it would be an awesome thing to have people sign up and to be on a registered list, to have companies be able to look at the tissues and see exactly where the gene therapies went. So when you do gene therapies in animals, you can actually put markers on them. So you can see where the gene therapy went. And with humans, we don't do that. So those are really interesting. And Johnny, thank you for that list. We have that list. We have that all in the Code Keeper. If anyone wants to go and look at, I think it's called bioviva-codekeeper.com, and it's a bunch of specific diseases and the gene therapies happening in there. And I've got to get another PhD on that, because we've got to get that going again. We keep having PhDs graduate and then we need to put somebody else in charge of it, because having it updated and having you be able to go see if you have heart disease or something like that, to look and see what the gene therapies are and what stage of development they're in, and if there's a clinical trial for you, is awesome. I cannot. Did anyone else hear? Oh, Johnny, you went to the ASGCT. We met there. We hung out at the ASGCT and we had dinner too. That's the biggest gene therapy conference of the year. And it is so many people. What was it, like 10,000 people or something? I mean, like some of the rooms were just jam packed, but it's kind of everything that's hot. It's kind of like going to Coachella. It's what's hot in gene therapy. So it's like 98% AAV. And then because of COVID, the mRNA sort of vaccines and deliveries are super hot. And then there was some lenti delivery as well. But there wasn't something that we're doing, which is the CMV, because our heart is sort of in this place where we want to start to deliver multiple genes at one time. And this is where things get even more interesting. I'm not sure if am I sharing the screen of us, or am I sharing the screen of my slides?
It
Oh,
says
we can't see the slides yet. Oh, here it comes. Okay. Yeah.
Okay,
I need to
there
go,
it is.
guys. So great talking to you all again. I'll see you on the next one.
Thank you very much, Kyle.
Okay, we'll talk to you soon.
We'll catch up very soon.
We're gonna miss you.
Appreciate it. All right.
So first of all, I guess we're going to talk about this. We did the data analysis of a study of 5 patients for dementia. This was back in, what was it, 2020? And we used 2 genes, telomerase reverse transcriptase and klotho. And this was just the beginning of our love of multi-gene delivery. With AAV, which is the darling of gene therapy that I talked about, you have to do this in 2 different you do it at the same time, but each gene therapy is developed separately. So it really doubles the cost of the gene therapy, and they have to be administered separately. And these are their fabulous proteins, like Jason was talking about. This is what they look like, which is ever so cool. And what we saw was increased cognitive performance on 4 out of 5 patients. 1 patient did not seem to respond to treatment very well. They responded, but not as well as the others. And what we saw was benefit to their biological age in their telomeres. And since telomerase reverse transcriptase was one of the genes that lengthens telomeres, I guess we shouldn't be surprised, but actually we debated about whether we would do this test or not, because we were giving such a small dose intranasally. So this was not treating the whole body, that we were surprised to see this. And those decreases in biological age hopefully mean that there will be increased immune capacity against COVID, and none of these patients died during the COVID pandemic, and that's great. And then the person who didn't have a response to the technology aged 1 year in 1 year, which is interesting. It doesn't always happen that way, but that's how it happened on that test. So we released that paper in a peer-reviewed journal, and you can go and see it. But we want to do gene therapy in a much bigger and bolder way. And we want to combine these genes, those longevity genes that you saw. We want to combine 4 or 5 of them at one time and deliver them and see if we can get the super wave. So in our paper that was out in PNAS with intranasal and injectable gene therapy, we saw the lifespan increase of just one gene, telomerase reverse transcriptase, of 41% in the mice. And that would be significant if that translated to humans. So what that would mean is if you were going to live to be maybe 78, 79, an average for the US, you might live to be over 110. And if you just took follistatin, you might live to be over 100. And that is maybe without any significant lifestyle changes, although we do suggest those, be as healthy as possible. So I'm going to rush through this so that I don't bore you. We have another paper that will be coming out hopefully in the next year. But these are the three peer-reviewed papers that we have at this point. But the reason that we're looking at CMV again is to simplify gene therapy for complex disorders such as aging. So if we wanted to give you 3 different genes in AAV, if you look over to the left, we'd have to do AAV gene therapy A and have that manufactured and delivered. Therapy B, manufactured, delivered. You would get them all the same day, but they would all be AAV gene therapy C, manufactured, delivered. They would be in 3 different injections. With CMV, you would be taking 1/3 the dose, which means less toxicity. And we would actually know that if your body was affected and we could see the effect of one gene, then you got all 3 genes. So, you know, this is important for things like when we start really working towards the human use of cellular reprogramming, you want to control cellular reprogramming. If you wanted to do it via gene therapy, probably a small molecule I think is better, but if you want to do it via gene therapy, you would want the control for the gene therapy to be in the same cells as the gene therapy, and this would give us the ability to do that. And then I talked a little bit about the code keeper, bioviva-codekeeper.com. If you have a disease, a specific disease, go check that out, see if there is a clinical trial in your area, and if you're interested in helping us work on it, please reach out. I believe we're looking for red meat now on that one. It's a really fun project, actually.
Hey, Liz, a question on the code keeper. So that's just sort of a database where you're storing clinical trials primarily on gene therapy, or?
Yeah, it's not only clinical trials, it's all of the data. So if let's say you have a rare form of genetic defect that affects your liver, okay? And you're interested in what's happening in gene therapy. So you go in there and you put in the name of your disease. It may or may not be there because the database is being worked on. Hopefully it's there. It would show you the genes that researchers are suggesting might work and what animal model they are in, all the way up to clinical trials. So let's say you found a researcher working on your gene that might cure your disease, and it's in a mouse model and it's sitting at some UC university. You could reach out to them. You could help them find funding. You could start a company and help them get all the way to humans. I mean, you know, it's just kind of, or maybe it just makes you feel good to know that it's there, and, you know, you don't have the wherewithal to do all of those things, but I suggest you do. But you might actually be the person who helps get the cure to humans that is ailing you. And so, you know, I think it's a powerful tool. On our side, we would use it for combinatorial gene therapy suspects. So we would be looking for genes that might play well with one another that are being used in other diseases. If they've been used in humans and have a safety and efficacy profile and have some sort of benefit towards aging, you could see flags. White flags would be going up all over the place, and we'd be really excited about that. So that's how we would use it on this side.
Nice. It sounds very useful. Let's get some flags going.
Yeah, and if you're a researcher and you want to go farther, there's a paid for version, and then it has all the promoters, the gene sequences, where they could be found, and everything. You know, always do your due diligence, double check, and have a PhD working with you, double check that the right variant's in there. But yeah, I mean, it can be a really powerful tool for speeding up research.
Very nice. Thanks.
So finally, I want to talk about access, because I know that we're on here with people who like access, want access, and actually would like to demand more cost-effective treatments. And in order to do that, we need to push towards the use of these technologies in people who need, want, or would die without them otherwise. So I always say that regulations are a great thing. It keeps, safer drugs in the system. But the problem is it's had no route for truly innovative medicine. And that's why you don't see these type of drugs in clinical trials, even though they should have been in clinical trials over a decade ago. They're just not well understood. And the regulators like to stick with the typical suspects that they think are less riskier. I think that medical tourism have shown that these therapies here really are the future, and that's where people are going. So it's kind of like a pot boiling over. If you want to stay alive and you want to stay healthy, you have to be proactive. And so people with the wherewithal will leave the medical system and they will go to places in the world where they can get access to technology that they otherwise cannot, that has a curative benefit. And so my best choice medicine route is a platform to bring in laws into any country in the world, which would allow people to get access to these new medicines pre-regulatory, so that our regulatory systems stop being burdened with having to worry and wonder whether a drug will work before they put it into the system, because they're very risk adverse. They could actually be looking at human data to go into the regulatory system, which would de-risk the US FDA and any other regulatory system in the world and speed it up exponentially. So the gene therapies that we've recently seen approved in hemophilia A and hemophilia B and Duchenne's, they have been worked on since the 1990s. Back when I told you things were, slowing down. And so you can see how long it took patients to actually get a curative medicine, and many patients died waiting. So this would give millions of patients the dignity to access medicine and work with a doctor who believes that there may be a benefit to using these medicines. And I think that that is where medicine should be. That's where it used to be until it was heavily regulated to the point where doctors now will only use specific drugs for a specific condition, even if they know their patients will die. And I think we owe it to make it a better world for our children and their children, that they should not see the diseases that we die from today. It's amazing how fast medicine moved when there was the open ability to use it. And now it is kind of screeched to a halt. And not only that, look at these AI chat bots. I mean, we were just astounded by them, right? I mean, it just happened like overnight. Medicine is working at the same pace. People would, they wouldn't believe the type of drugs available today if they just had access to these medicines and they were made available to people who needed them, and then worked back towards healthier subjects so that you don't get sick and die of aging to begin with. And then this is our company, and I don't really need to share that because everybody here knows us, and you can find us at bioviva-science.com if you're interested in learning more. But now, what do you guys think about regulations?
I like the entire movement towards giving people more options. I mean, more the capability not to have limitations, especially if they make that choice on their own. I mean, they're not being forced into it. If they have a drug or therapy and they feel that it could help them based on scientific evidence, I mean, I feel like people should be able to do it. So we're definitely on board with best choice medicine, especially for people who are in the latter stages of aging and they don't have the time to wait decades for a lot of these things to come to fruition. So
yeah. Thank you. I always think that the worst thing that the media does is they act as if patients are uninformed or being taken advantage of when they're actually professionals at their disease, they should be, they should have the agency and autonomy to do with their body what they would like to, and especially if a medical doctor is willing to work with them. I'm so surprised how, you know, we treat people like they are dumb, and yet we are so smart. You know, we are so capable. And so thank you for saying that.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree. What do you think, Johnny, Paul?
Well, one thing I know as a fact, aging is 100% fatal. Anything we do in our life is a calculated risk, whether we get in a car to visit our doctor or go to the gym, or on an airplane to go to a different country for an innovative therapy. Paul?
Yep. I can't put it any better than that. Thank you, Johnny.
Yeah, we're kind of, I mean, with a simple signature, you can jump out of a plane. But, you know, if you go to do, you know, a couple of years ago, I lost one of my dogs, and I had a vet who did regenerative medicine in Mexico. And he had a way that could save the dog using all legal protocol, a completely legal protocol with PRP. And I contacted several vet universities, you know, schools here locally, and veterinary offices. And I was even sent letters that, you know, clearly these people were trying. Anyway, everyone said no, that these people were trying to take advantage of me, even though if they would have read my email, there was no cost to anyone. I was willing to pay them. The protocol was for free. I was a business owner, and I was interested in having this done. And I couldn't even find anyone to treat my dog with PRP, and he died. And PRP is a completely legal, it's your own blood's substance. And I mean, the risk aversion in this, you know, highly sue happy society is just, it's immense. You know, I mean, I can't, they treated me like I didn't know what I was getting into, just because they just didn't want to do it.
Yeah, sorry to hear
And
about your
it
dog.
was shocking to me.
Yeah, the entire traditional medical system has so many issues that are so multi-layered, and really, you know, it's all about treating the symptoms, treating the end symptoms that have occurred, especially from aging in particular. People get cancer or cognitive disorders, and there's so many drugs that big pharma have on hand, ready to go. I mean, if you get cancer, there's all kinds of therapies. But, you know, how many of these drugs are actually preventative? Not many. Probably. Are any preventative that are actually in the traditional medical system?
Like,
Not their
you know,
business model.
there was you know, maybe some of the repurposed items. I don't use it, but some people are using metformin, which is, see, type 2 diabetes seems to be like a whole realm itself that might have some drugs that are beneficial, right? Because metabolic disorder, I mean, actually, you know, the whole idea of metabolism used to be the hugest, what was considered the hugest driver of aging. And then people looked at metabolism, and they realized that, you know, first they thought, well, if you have a really fast metabolism, you have a really short life. And then they started looking at bats compared to mice. And then they said, okay, well, that's not quite it. So it must be the rate of regeneration. But still, metabolic disease, like type 2 diabetes and other metabolic disorders, yeah, you know, you can affect them by your lifestyle, number one. That should be the first thing you're doing. But I know that for somebody who's 250 pounds, that's a really hard proposition to give them.
Right.
So when we start looking at gene therapies, we might be able to get them on the right track. And then if we can actually target at-risk individuals before they get to that point when they're younger with these sort of regenerative therapies that do have a benefit to metabolic disorder and other diseases around there, because they're treating cellular aging, then we get the biggest bang for the buck. And, you know, I would predict that all of our gene candidates would be used when you're actually quite young in the future.
I get what you're saying, and I agree. And, you know, I've heard of metformin and rapamycin and
Yeah,
and rapamycin being a big one. And I mean, I mean, the way I'm thinking about gene therapy now is it could be both a preventative thing and also a reactive thing. You know, you could have a healthy individual trying to enhance their body to be better, healthier, slow down their degeneration, slow down their aging, improve their metabolic system in general. And then on the other end, you could have someone like that young boy you showed that, you know, got the gene therapy to fix an underlying issue, and then of course older people who, you know, need these technologies and tools to really revert back and cure their age-related diseases. Yeah. So
Yeah, I think that that's true. And the reason that we start in the reactive area with the regulatory system is obviously that's what they're set up for. So they're set up for reactive medicine, and it's great to use a technology to help people who are sick. And then that creates a proof of concept and a safety profile that, you know, you can't say that new medicine has, and you can't say that old medicine has it either, because everyone's dying taking the old medicine. So but what we can say that it would give us a profile to start moving it backwards in age. So you can move it down the timeline and use it in healthier people. And so in the medical tourism space, I think that, you know, just it's suggested that you're out of childbearing years. But I think that the most sophisticated people do take these technologies as preventative when they can. And I think we'll see a trend in that direction, because once you're battling something when you're fully sick, you have a mechanism of, you know, a catastrophe. There's a bunch of things that are now going wrong, and you're deep into disease state.
yeah, no, I know what you mean. And how do you see, in terms of kind of the barrier of having gene therapy on sort of a broad, wide scale, from distribution to, say, like manufacturing a lot of these, cost and regulation? I mean, do you see any one of those as sort of the biggest barrier, or just like the complexity, or I'm just
I
curious.
think the biggest barrier is manufacturing, because that's where all the cost comes from. So, you know, when a person wants agents, I have to put things into perspective for you, because manufacturing is expensive, right? But it's not as expensive as the regulated gene therapies. So for the regulated gene therapies, the cheapest gene therapy that you can get through the regulatory system is $425,000 to treat one eye. And it's, you know, over 800,000 to treat two eyes. So almost $1 million. And today, if your child was born with spinal muscular atrophy, in which they might die within 4 to 6 months, it is $2 to $5 million to treat them. And gene therapy doesn't have to be like that. So manufacturing is expensive. It is exorbitantly expensive, and it already puts gene therapy out of the reach of 99% of people if you were doing a one-off gene therapy, meaning only one person wanted gene therapy. But when you start to scale it, and 10 people want it, and 100 people want it, and 1,000 people want it, and if you're treating the world, it's actually a very affordable technology. So it takes the same amount of time to make one treatment, between 12 and 16 weeks, as it does to make a treatment for 10 or 50 people. So our hope is that so many people become interested, they demand action, they demand access, they push for best choice medicine, and then when they can get access to a therapy, it's affordable because so many people want it. And that would be the perfect scenario. You know, I've always said, which is, you know, that's not the way business works today, but that healthcare should be free. Your health should be free. And if companies want to make money, it should be off of enhancement, right? Making your life better than. Right now, these are, they do blur the line between preventative medicine and enhancement, but in the future, they'll be commonplace. You know, everyone will just get them. They'll get them as preventative. They'll, you know, get a stick in the arm, and, you know, maybe you won't even need your infectious disease immunizations anymore. I mean, some of them you should get so that they don't spread again, but your immune system will be so awesome. And they will be the game changers to living extraordinary, healthy, and long lives.
Very nice. Paul, Johnny, any thoughts on where gene therapy is going to take us here?
Well, I have a question for Liz, all of you actually. What do you think is the future of personalized genomic analysis and developing a therapy with a different combination of therapies for that person?
Oh, that's a really good idea. Well, for instance, if you had hemophilia A, you were born today and you have hemophilia A, but today we already treat aging as a disease, I suppose, you know, you would immediately be given your your healthy variant of your, what is it? In hemophilia A, is it factor, there's 10, there's factor 8, 9, and 10. Maybe I should have picked hemophilia B, so I know it's factor 9. And then you would then also, you know, in the course of your life, be given your gene therapies, probably after you've gone through puberty, that will slow or reverse your cellular aging. So like some people will have distinct things, but even you might have a variation that we don't know about that is the reason why you're so fabulous at your age, and I wouldn't be so fabulous at that age. And so, you know, or maybe you have a deficit in an area that you don't know, because we don't know of a specific disease that hasn't been diagnosed yet because we haven't started treating biological aging. And I may not have that. And so you might need a supplement gene to make your aging or your health span better. I mean, it's so exciting because we don't even know what's possible because we're so far behind in the research right now. So we've got to speed up to what we have, what we've known for a couple decades, and then speed past it, hopefully at a safe rate, so that we find out all this fantastic information in our lifetimes.
Yeah. So to answer Johnny's question, excluding diseases and things like that and focusing just on longevity, what I would love to see is genetic interventions for essentially all the hallmarks of aging. Bioviva developed this tremendous human telomerase reverse transcriptase therapy. Liz herself got it done like 11 or 12 years ago. Liz's telomeres have been growing continuously ever since. I got it done 2 years ago, and mine have also been growing pretty much continuously ever since. So as far as I'm concerned, that one gene therapy fixed that particular hallmark of aging. And so if we could get gene therapies to address all of the other 9, 10, 11 hallmarks of aging, however many you want to count them, different people count different things as hallmarks of aging. But if we could get interventions for all those, then we could test and figure out, okay, what are your particular problems? Is it the extracellular matrix? Is it stem cells? Is it, you know, the epigenome? Is it your telomeres? What is it for this particular individual? And focus on, you know, what is the biggest danger for you specifically, because it's going to be a little different with different people.
You know, Paul is so right. And I was going to hit on that. And I thought, well, is that kind of over people's heads? But there are the hallmarks of aging, and those are the things that are happening at the cellular level. And I predict that those will be the diseases that you're diagnosed with in the future, because we won't have, you know, dementia and chronic kidney disease and heart disease. We're going to have things like telomere attrition. Okay, you have telopathy. Your telomeres are getting short. You need a treatment for that. And hopefully our company, that's why we're working on that big vector, can give you a lot of different genes that target a whole bunch of those, and maybe someday all of those. But we're working with any company in the world that will work along with us too, because, you know, that's fine with us, because there's a lot going on here. You know, you're working, as Paul said, a cellular matrix issue, and here's the therapy that you need to deal with that. So we'll be catching it really early, and we will know from these hallmarks what the actual disease is. Stem cell depletion, you know, and the great thing is that some of the genes, like lengthening telomeres, we showed make the mitochondria healthier. So maybe PGC1 alpha would be a better candidate for more and more robust mitochondria to treat mitochondrial dysfunction, but telomerase will definitely help the cells that it transfects. And stem cell depletion, lengthening your telomeres, should help them have more cellular divisions. But I'll bet you there's a gene out there that we'll be hunting, and we'll eventually find that will be maybe even more efficient. But yeah, the telomerase reverse transcriptase will always be in my heart, because I did take it. It is absolutely intrinsically tied to 25 species lifespans, how many cellular divisions that you can have and make to repair your body is intrinsically tied to how long you're going to live and when you're going to get end stage disease. So I cannot underestimate or understate, maybe it is, how important that gene therapy is. It should be integral to all of the therapies, and thank you for mentioning it, because I think that people, what they do is they kind of become fans of something, like they become fans of clearing senescent cells or fans of cellular reprogramming. Girlfriend and boyfriend, you got to get together, because you got to pull them all together, because it's going to take them all. When they reprogram those cells in those mice, they don't even live as long as they do if you just lengthen telomeres. We got to have it all.
Yep.
We want it all. We want it now.
They all matter. And so many people are just like, oh, I'm touching one part of the elephant. None of the other parts of the elephant exist. But no, the whole elephant matters.
Yeah, it's really a whole body condition. I like it. I thought your approach was interesting, Paul. Target each one, and taking into account the whole, and touching on a little what Johnny's question, and I thought what you guys said was on point. I think we do need personalized medicine. I think personalized gene therapy will be the future, because everything in theory should be personalized, from, say, diet, exercise, nutrition, even sleep. Everyone's biology is so different. Something that's very good for me in my diet may be very bad for someone else in their diet. Everyone has a very unique composition of cells, unique microbiome, their environment is unique. And I think we will get there across each of these things, from lifestyle to gene therapy and so on. So I think
there's a lot of other good therapies out there. Like Paul got me looking at TPE. I'm excited about that, and other technology. I mean, don't become just a fan of one company. Like, really support everybody out there, because there's just too much vying to get attention and investment dollars. My God, this should all be funded. I mean, this should all just be like, what is more important than your health span? And then tie that in with lifespan and the amount of productivity that you can do and the amount of awesome experiences you can have. And don't tell me you're too tired to live longer. Then take a gene therapy or therapy and get your damn energy up, because there's like a whole world to explore out there,
Right, I agree. I think there's this perception shift that it's slowly happening. There is a movement. It's happening around the world. People are, they do want to live healthier. And to one of your previous points, the U.S. economy, we need people to work longer. And AI aside, we are going to have a lot of older people who need money and need to survive. So we're going to need people to stay active and keep working, unless, of course, the AIs are doing more of the labor, which could be the case as well, but we'll see.
Yeah, but you still want to feel good. And I was just on a call with a group that we licensed some technology to in China, and they were saying that there are 250 million people who are aged that need access to new and regenerative technologies. That's almost the population of the United States. I mean, that's a lot of people to be sick. And that's you guys, moreover, it's a lot of suffering. I had to watch my dad, slowly die of Parkinson's, and we did gain him back over 2 years. He went from barely being able to walk and no smiling. He could smile to the day he died, and he could walk, till the last couple months over steps and sidewalks and everything. And if we had best choice medicine, he might still be alive today. And I'll tell you what, it was not a beautiful experience. He did not want to die. It was horrible. I mean, and people are touched by this all of the time, and we act like it's not happening. This is terrifying. Okay. This is, I mean, gosh, I was just reading, I'm not sure if that was you, Paul. Somebody wrote, that like we're at a certain age, we're like a spiraling plane coming closer to the earth, and we're just watching, and we're trying to pretend it's not happening. we can't leave the world like this. I mean, we came into a world in which medicine worked at breakneck speed to ensure that we didn't die of simple infectious disease, that made sure that children could be born healthy even when they might have otherwise not been born at all, and the mother might have died with them. I mean, come on, let's go. We do it or we die. We do it or we watch our family die. I mean, isn't that enough?
That is the motivation, and we did see the U.S. deploy vaccines at such a fast pace, and I guess our call to action is for let's get let's get that pace going again. People thought that was a time of need, of war. But in reality, that's happening around the clock, as you're alluding to. People are constantly dying from aging in the hundreds of thousands per day, and I think it's not really well known. It's not really talked about in the media. Everyone thinks that the main things to worry about are other things, but in reality, that is the thing that's taking the most people out. And from our perspective, aging is a reversible process. And so therefore, we have a moral obligation to accelerate the pace of these life-saving technologies, including gene therapy as one of them.
Yeah, and the mRNA vaccine, by the way, I took my vaccine, and no, I didn't, I'm not suffering negative consequences. It happened within 10 months, and it was new, exploratory, and completely innovative. And so, we can move incredibly fast. And with these technologies, it's not the same thing because their research has been around for decades. Gene therapy for multiple decades, and the genes that we work with, many of them for over a decade. And some of them have been in humans for certain diseases. So, we really have to take the wool off entirely, take a closer look and see what's worth fighting for. And I think for a lot of people, this is, the moment of realizing that, you thought your life was nearly over. Maybe if you got in the game, it's not. Maybe it's time for another new adventure,
Right.
Let's not lose all that talent. I mean, people have all this talent. They learn all of these things during their lifespan, and then it's like burning books. We have to call an end to it.
Very well said. Thank you.
Very well said.
Well said.
And the pace of change will continue to get faster. As the AIs continue to help us, we'll be able to speed up drug discovery, implementation of these therapies, and many more aspects. Luckily, we'll get to the point where things are increasing, and we'll see Nobel Prize discoveries every few minutes eventually, and someday every few seconds. And that will, in turn, assuming we have some form of alignment, in turn we'll be able to cure nearly every disease actually at that point, including aging. So that's the direction we'll go. And in the interim, we'll continue on this path. And thanks, Liz, for talking about gene therapy. Thanks, Paul, Johnny. Really appreciate it, guys.
Thank you.
I will take us offline now. Thank you.